cast your mind back to Unit 3. Do you remember that we did a search for cookie recipes, and Google was able to show us things like cook time and ingredients and calories? I said at the time that we would talk about how that was done, what was going on behind the scenes later. Well, that time has arrived, because how that was being done is using Schema.org markup. So let's go back to that same search. Now I've typed cookie recipe into Google and I get a list of results. But if I click on the recipes link right there, what I get instead is a list of recipes. Not just any list of web documents that have the words cookie and recipe in them, but a list of actual recipes. Now let's take a look at this third one here from the Food Network, simply because I like Alton Brown. Now let's take a look at this particular recipe. What we have here is a title, some information about the provenance, if you will, of this particular recipe. It says recipe courtesy of Alton Brown, show Good Eats, episode The Cookie Clause. That's the name of the episode that Alton Brown cooked this particular recipe on, I suppose. Then we get some data about the preparation, total time, prep time, cook time, yield, how many cookies it makes, and a list of ingredients and a set of narrative directions. Remember, of course, that recipes are nicely structured, so they make a good example for showing you this kind of markup. Now, let's take a look at the source code behind this recipe. I'm not going to parse the source of this page in exhaustive detail because there's a lot here, but notice right in the middle, item type, schema.org recipe. We're being referred to schema.org's recipe entity. Item scope contained within a div tag, which means that everything down to some closed div tag is the scope of the recipe. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail on the source code. Instead, I've copy and pasted chunks of that source into a slide just for readability, and because, I'll be honest, there's a lot of markup behind that recipe that's just simply not relevant to our purposes here. So, what we're looking at here is just the header, just this piece right here. What we have first is div item scope, which means that everything within this opening div and some closed div far down the page is the scope of the recipe. Item type refers to the recipe entity. The ID here and class, these are not schema.org standard markup, so I'm just going to ignore them. I'm assuming that these are codes that were made up by the good people who create the Food Network's website, but we will ignore those. Item prop, date published, and a date. What date was this particular recipe published on the Food Network's website? On that date. Item property name. The name of this recipe is sugar cookies. Item property author refers to item type schema.org person. Alton Brown, right? Who is the person being described here? The person being described is Alton Brown. Item property name, content Alton Brown, recipe courtesy of Alton Brown. And it gets even more interesting because now we have embedded in the recipe header item type TV series. What is it that we are describing? We are talking about the TV series Good Eats. Item property episode, item type schema.org TV episode. Episode is the cookie clause. So schema.org not only has entities to describe recipes, they also have entities to describe TV shows and individual TV episodes. So because this is a recipe that comes from a television show, you have TV show as an attribute of the recipe. And all of this is just from the header. We haven't even gotten to the recipe yet. Now this is the data about the recipe, how long it will take to prepare, yield, etc. DT and DD and whatnot, those are all standard HTML tags. DT describes a term, DD is a description of that term. We will ignore those. Those are standard HTML tags. Item property total time, content, an encoded time, 2 hours 24 minutes is what that translates to. Item property prep time, content, time encoded again, which translates to 15 minutes, right? 0 hours 15 minutes. 2 hours 24 minutes, 2H24M, 2 hours 24 minutes. Item property cook time, content equals 9 minutes, etc. Item property recipe yield, etc. All of these standard pieces of markup that are in schema.org to describe characteristics or properties of a recipe. And then we get a list of ingredients. Item property ingredients and one ingredient, item property ingredients and another ingredient, etc., etc. Item property recipe instructions, and we get this block of text that is the narrative directions. Now let's actually take a look at the schema.org entity recipe. So first of all, recipe inherits properties from thing. It inherits properties from creative work. Then if you scroll all the way down, you get the properties that are unique just to recipe. You get things like cooking method and cook time and ingredients and recipe yield and prep time and all of these characteristics, all of these properties that showed up in our cookie recipe. Now, if we go back to our Google search, where we have our list of cookie recipes, and we click on Search Tools, as we did back in Unit 3, we get a list of ingredients, a list of cook times, list of calories, and whatnot. Let's look at ingredients. Now, if we wanted to filter out, say, almonds, we could do that. And now we know how that works. Now we know that as long as a recipe is presenting a list of ingredients using schema.org, Google, on the interface side, when you conduct your search, can identify ingredients. So if you want to filter out almonds, all Google needs to do is remove all the recipes with almonds listed as an ingredient in schema.org format. So schema.org is a way of embedding metadata about the object that you are describing in your web document. In this case, it's data about the recipe, so that then On the use side, that is to say, when you do a search for a recipe, the search tool, in this case Google, but remember also Bing and Yahoo are partners on the Schema.org initiative, so this functionality is built in there as well. On the use side, when you conduct your search for a cookie recipe, the search tool is able to give you options on the interface side to include or exclude certain characteristics that are encoded in Schema.org, recipe items or preparation time or whatnot. So the point here is that the more semantic metadata is included in a web document, the more that a tool like a search engine interface is able to do to help you on the use end customize your search.